All right, welcome back, mates. Let's discuss Mr. Artur Beterbiev and Mr. Joe Smith Jr.'s fight. For whatever the reasons, this fight did not get the usual hyping that fights of this nature normally gets. But then again, it really didn't need the big drama show and hyping up. Both fighters, Beterbiev and Smith Jr., are all business heading into this fight. There was none of the usual pre-fight antics. No one took a swing at another during the weigh-in. No roughhousing or smack talk. Not even a coach needed to be held back. The face-off was like a great business meeting coming to an end. Smith Jr. and Beterbiev are two businessmen on a collision course. And although there was none of the usual pre-hype drama leading up to their fight, do not be fooled. This fight should be action-packed from first punch to the last. Let me start this off by saying that I'm not the biggest Beterbiev fan out there. I was very critical of his lack of decent footwork, defense, and his technical inabilities. I stated he was more of a tough man with basic boxing skills. But Beterbiev did demonstrate some good footwork last night. In the beginning, he was very evasive and used his footwork to offset the power-punching Smith Jr. So with that said, let's take a closer look at what actually went down in this fight. Quite obviously, in a fight of this nature, there was less feeling out of the opponent in the first round. Within the first 15 seconds, Beterbiev launched a monster right hook to start things off, which was immediately followed by Smith Jr. launching a monster right hook of his own to answer back. I thought Smith Jr. would be more effective down the stretch in the latter rounds, but Smith Jr. had other ideas and decided to stand his ground. As you can see, Beterbiev still using that footwork to keep Smith Jr. constantly adjusting to his new locations as he looked for options to punch. And the plot thickened. Beterbiev pressed the issue by upping his aggression, causing Smith Jr. to abort the jab and answer back with serious intentions of his own. As the fight progressed, Beterbiev continued to press the issue while constantly moving on Smith Jr. The first knockdown came at the close of the first round, and although it was not the best placed or cleanest landing punch, it had enough power to send Mr. Smith Jr. to the canvas briefly. Unfortunately, with the first knockdown, the beginning of the end for Joe Smith Jr. was very near, because Beterbiev was like that shark that had just tasted blood and wanted some more. Smith Jr. now has to dig deep and fight off the blood-hungry shark in Beterbiev. Beterbiev struck for a second time and sent Smith Jr. to the canvas once again. Smith Jr., now feeling the effects of the knockdowns, has to go to survival mode. Unfortunately, survival mode for fighters such as Smith Jr. is to fight harder, which is just fuel for Beterbiev's fire. Beterbiev scored 3 knockdowns of Smith and finished Smith Jr. with a second round TKO to capture his third light heavyweight title. Okay, so who's next for Beterbiev? Could it be Anthony Yarde? Possibly Dimitri Bivol? Or Canelo Alvarez? I honestly doubt Yarde would fare very well. I mean, he was beaten by Kovalev in one of his first really big tests. I think Canelo has rethought that whole challenging himself and moving up to heavyweight classes thing. Well, hopefully anyway. So that leaves good old Dimitri Bivol. And this is the next logical fight for them and us. But real quick, to answer my question from the previous video, is Artur Beterbiev the boogeyman? Yes, I think he is the boogeyman. This guy's tough, rugged, has a 100% KO record, And honestly, I don't see him losing anytime soon. And if he was to lose, I believe it would not be against a fighter. It would be against more of a slick and technical defensive-minded boxer. But unfortunately, there aren't many in that weight class.